Kelvin, man, I was actually thinking about when you right after you left for Columbus, you came back for one of the legacy trips to Florida. Remember hopping the bus with us
Yeah,
going down
yeah,
there?
yeah, yeah.
And do you remember how hard it freaking rained down there? And we were driving through, I mean, massive puddles. And
Yes,
I
and
won't get anybody. What's that?
we stayed at that hotel right on the beach, right?
Dude, I was just talking to Steve about how the tide came up to our doors.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
I remember opening my door and I'm like, oh, I gotta I had to take off my shoes just to get to the lobby. And I just walked
Yeah, that's right.
barefoot, ankle deep, and just dried off.
Yeah, and then we come up to the pool. I remember that. I also remember that trip. The bus driver let me drive the bus down the street.
I was about to say, man, are we allowed to rat him out? Hope he's not in trouble.
Just don't say the company.
Yeah, man, those were good times, man.
Yeah, it
That
was
trip
fun.
was
That trip
always
was
fun.
always fun.
Yeah,
Always fun. Really enjoyed it.
I thought
I
about
still do it. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not with the club anymore, but I've thought about calling Bobby and just saying, hey, man, let me guest coach. Let me just tag along and I'll recruit a little bit while I'm down there, watch the OP games or something, you know.
It's always a
That's
fun one.
yeah, that was good stuff. But well, look, man, I'm pumped to talk about this stuff because you're in a different world. You're attached to the academies that you're dealing with some of the best kids in the country, and you too are. I love the conversation right before, and we're talking about you dealing with kids that are in the portal now, and so before we jump into all that stuff, why don't you kind of give us an update? I've seen you on TV a few times. We're sending pictures like, oh, it's Kelvin spotting, at this national team game. So
now.
yeah, man,
No.
you're just coming to us though, buddy. I'm not getting any autographs. Okay, so but why don't you give us a little update on what you got going on and your jump with the crew.
Yeah, what we were just talking about has been this is year 7 here at the club. Um, left legacy in 2017 for an opportunity to be here in Columbus. I started off as the U12 coach. When I first got here, we moved here in August of 2017, and then in October of 2017, the same year, we were brought into the office to say, hey, the club is going to be moving to Texas. So we weren't sure what we weren't sure what we were going to do. We actually thought about moving back. We thought about moving to Texas. We were thinking about other things, but fortunately enough, we kind of stuck it out and stayed. This is year 7, but I've worked my way from U12s through our U15s through our U19s through various openings and people moving on and club evolving, and then 2020 August of 2020, I stepped into the role of academy director and helped run the club for the last 3 years. And then most recently, this past summer, I've stepped down in that role and then moved back onto the field and coaching. The head coach for our U19s, I help assist our second team, and then I help Dan Locke, our new director of player development, help manage the academy and the coaching side and the player development side. So it's been quite a journey. I've worn many hats throughout the 7 years here at the club, but we are blessed and fortunate, and we love it here in Columbus. We love the club. It's been really fortunate to me and helped kind of evolve my career, and it's always an environment where we're looking to continue to grow and to learn.
Yeah, I'd say I'm going to be out there. We're bringing the boys. We're playing 2 games. We're flying into hopefully we're flying into Columbus, maybe taking the bus, but we're going to come out and play Kenyon and Denison. Denison's in Columbus, right? And Kenyon's a little bit out. It's
Kenyon's a little bit outside.
Denison's
Denison,
close.
yeah, it's like 30 minutes outside of the city.
Yeah. So I know we fly into Columbus, and I was going to give you a call, man, so we can either get a tour, come see a session, maybe hang out on the field for a little bit, give the guys a little crew experience.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys let me know some dates, and if we're in town, absolutely, we'll love to catch up and we give you a tour of the new facility. Gunderson was in town a couple months ago with the girls, and they were able to set up a stadium tour and come check out the facility. So happy to make anything work.
No, absolutely.
And we're an open door when it comes to sessions. So if you and the staff want to come out, let me know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We want to do that. Go hang out, get a beer or something.
Absolutely.
But well, look, man, I want to jump into this. I want to start with something that we haven't. I don't know if we talked about this much on the podcast, Scott, but the draft just took place. So kind of help me out with that, because I watched the draft. I love the NFL draft. I'm a Bears fan. We got the first pick, so I'm pretty excited. I want to see what we do this year. But MLS draft is a little different, and I'm a little blown away by something. It shocks me when I see like picks being skipped, or I'll see these kids get drafted, and like it seems like it's way different. What's the process like? I don't know how much involvement you have with that, but I mean, what do you guys think? Who are they drafting? How do they go through this process to get these kids?
Disclaimer: I don't claim to know much about it or to be an expert on it. This is
That's
more
fair.
my kind of outside observations and have seen how things have gone throughout the years through various clubs. So I think it's different depending on who you are in your organization. It can range from not using your picks at all to using all of your picks and drafting somebody. And I think a little bit of the strategy goes from, if you're not using your picks, it's because you are using your internal talent to fill that roster.
Right.
And then you're using your second team roster, and then you're using those picks and selling those picks off for TAM, GAM money that you can then use for acquiring first team players. Or you can use some of those picks for players that are going to continue to grow and be a part of your second team that might not be ready for your first team, that can help create a core group of older, more mature talent around some of your younger talent. And then the flip side of that is you are kind of drafting a guy that you are going to bring into a preseason that you think has potential to be in your first team roster.
Gotcha.
Whether they make it right away and they go directly to your first team, or they come down to your second team, they get you minutes, and then they progress within that environment, and hopefully they move their way up. For us, over the last few years, it's been a mix of both. Last year was the first year of MLS Next Pro, which is our first year that we actually had a second team here. So we used a draft to solidify a core group of guys, which made a really competitive team. We had some younger academy players that weren't quite ready to make the full jump to the second team, which we put them in that training environment. They got some time. And then we had some guys that we thought maybe could be ready for the first team after year one, but played majority in that environment, got playing time. And then after year one of MLS Next Pro, 3 of those guys have moved on. 4 of those guys have moved on. Goalkeeper Patrick Schulte, who ended up being starting goalkeeper for the first team. Mo Farsi, Jason Russell Rowe, Philip Quinton were all guys that played in the second team and then promoted their way up to the first team. And then that promotion also left the core group of guys that created a balance for the transition for the club of kind of investing time into our younger talents. So year 2, we still had that core group of guys. We drafted a couple other guys as well, kind of rounded it out. And then we were able to kind of promote some of that younger talent and give them minutes. So out of MLS Next Pro last year, if you're looking at playing minutes, we had the most minutes of players birth years 05 and 06 by, I think, almost 1,500 minutes. So we played majority of our younger kids, got a lot of time compared to other clubs. So I think it's their strategy. And then you have other clubs that basically take their high potential academy kids, put them into the second team, so they're getting that environment. Sometimes it's not the most competitive, but to each their own. It's a little bit different in how kind of you use that draft, but also most importantly, how you're developing that talent, which is, I think, is the beauty of kind of the MLS academies and the evolution of what it's going to be and what it has been.
Yeah, it seems like you and I are in our 40s now, and the pro environment's significantly different than it was when we were growing up. And it seems like most of the top kids, they have to go into these, MLS2 or, these other groupings before they can even think about playing in the MLS. I mean, it's just these kids that are drafted really, really high are still, they're minor leagued basically, to use a baseball term here. I mean, how many guys are being drafted and immediately helping the top division, the top teams?
Yeah, and I wouldn't begin to say, because I don't know.
Okay.
And there's various levels of the draft as well. You've got guys that have been in college for 4 years and then entered the draft. You've got guys that have only been there for a year or two or less than 4 years that sign contracts with the league and go Generation Adidas, who are basically guaranteed to end up on a first team, depending on what those contracts end up
Gotcha.
looking like. So those guys most likely end up going straight to the first team and contributing, if not contributing right away, down to the second team, getting minutes and then coming back up. Those are the guys that the clubs have invested in, and most importantly, the league have invested in terms of future talent. You've also got some of those guys now that are foregoing Generation Adidas contracts and looking to maybe go USL or look to go directly overseas. There's been a few guys the last few years that have directly gone overseas straight from college, and you're starting to see that a little bit more as well. So I don't say you necessarily have to be in an MLS environment to become a pro. It's obviously a plus because you develop in that environment. They get to see you day in and day out. And if you're comparing a kid that you've invested in the last 5 years versus a kid that you've seen play 40 some odd college games, you might invest in the kid that's been in your environment for the last 4 years, 5 years, rather than taking a chance.
Yeah, so I'm sure the number one priority, the number one goal is to find these youth kids and then eventually see them playing in the stadium one day. And I think that's awesome. But you have way more than just a roster of 20 guys for the MLS team. So you've got, hundreds of kids in the academy, and a lot of these kids are going to end up having to go play college soccer instead or go to different pro environments. So jumping into the college world from Columbus, I mean, kind of, what's that look like? Is it changing since you've been there? You've been there now for a few years at the top working with those older guys. So what does that look like from when you got into where it is now? And then, you had mentioned the transfer portal. So kind of transitioning into that, what's it like now for those kids after they've gone off to school?
Yeah, I mean, as much as the club itself has evolved in my time here, we talked about it from being here, the club potentially moving, and then when that happens, you lose staff, you lose leadership. It's a transition of bringing in new staff, new leadership, and most importantly, it's getting the first team up, and then you're reinvesting and pushing the investment down into the academy. So, for my time here, when I first got here, of all the homegrowns that we've had, all of them had gone to college except for two. I think it was the very first one, and then one about 9 years ago now, that went straight to the first team. But every other homegrown that we've had outside of that went straight to college. That was the pathway to get to our first team. Part of that was because we didn't have a second team. So we talked about a second ago, are you willing to take a kid that you've worked with for 4 or 5 years versus a college kid? Well, the kid that you've worked with for the 4 years in the academy, 5 years in the academy, you never actually got to see them play against adults because we never had a second team or an environment to play adult football. So the environment for us to see them play adult football was to go to college. So some of them were there for 6 months, played a season in college. Some of them were there for 4 years, and then we brought them back. But that was the pathway. Now with the introduction of our second team over the last 2-3 years, we are now able to see the younger talent in an adult environment. So you're able to make a more informed decision. When it's time to make that decision, do they go pro pathway or then do they go college? So that's kind of been the evolution of the club in terms of the pathway. And don't get me wrong, my job is to develop professional players for our first team. That's the goal. And it's to get them from the academy to the second team to the first team, or the academy to the first team, whatever that is. Every kid's going to be different. But the reality is the majority of these kids are going to end up going to college, and college will end up being their pathway. And my job is to help find the best school for them. So as we were saying, the majority of our kids have gone to college, but in my time here, we've had five of those homegrowns in the last 7 years have gone to college. And then hopefully we'll have soon now, some of those homegrowns are coming straight from the academy as there's more investment. So, and again, some of those homegrowns over the last 4 or 5 years have gone from being in college for 3 months, basically their freshman season, to being at top schools, Georgetown's, Wake Forest's, Stanford's, graduating, getting their degrees, and then coming back and signing first team contracts before they enter the draft. So it's been different. I was a bit long-winded. I don't know if I answered your question, but That's kind of been the evolution of the club and where we are at and what we're trying to do.
And for your academy, you have a top academy team per age groups. Do you have multiple teams, or how big's the pool in general per age group?
We have 3 full academy teams: U15, U17, U19. And it's just one team. So
Okay.
depending on the age group, depends on the number of kids. We try to keep our rosters small because at the end of the day, it's important to see the kids play. And if you've got a roster of 30-something kids, you're then having to mix and match. At some point, there's going to be an environment where a kid doesn't play. So
Right.
how have we created the best environment for this kid by having a roster of 30 when we know eventually he's not going to play? So it's better to make some tough decisions rather than who's going to play and who's not going to play. But we have a roster of roughly between 16 to 22 kids.
Nice.
Depends on the age group. And our U17 age group is a double age group of U16s and U17s. So you're typically going to have a larger roster at that one age group because it's a double age group. And what we have found at U16/U17 age group, it's a big jump going from U15 to U17s. And historically, you lose a lot of kids making that jump just because they haven't physically grown and developed. So also by having a little bit smaller of a roster, you make sure that the kids that are on that roster, the kids that you've invested in, they're going to play because they need to play. And you're not just hiding them down the line, down a roster and protecting them and saying you're not going to play. We'll find the right time for you to play. You have a small roster, you're going to play. If you struggle, that's part of growth. We'll put you in an environment to make sure that there's some success, but for us, it's important that the kids are playing and having roster sizes that reflect that.
Nice. And so these kids that are going off to school, they're not ready to sign a big contract or anything. You want to put them through the college pathway. Kind of what's your give program in place? Do you have a guy that's kind of in charge of housing these guys, finding these guys a good home? I mean, what's that look like for these guys? Like, how do they come to you with, this is what I want. I obviously want to throw in some academic credentials there. They're not just going to, once they go to school, I'm sure it's more than just, well, which is the best soccer fit. I mean, you got to look at the other things just in case everything goes backwards and there's money involved. Mm-hmm. So kind of what does that process look for those kids?
Yeah, we have a person in place that kind of spearheads our college outreach and recruitment. I was doing it over the last kind of 3 years in my role as the academy director, just networking and knowing coaches such as you, and my previous roles at the legacy and kind of the coaches and the networks of people that I had developed there, and just kind of being that liaison and helping them. And when I first started, it was just like when I was at the legacy, just kind of being a voice and kind of help navigating them through the process. And there was always 3 things that I told them that had to make sense when you make your college decision. Soccer has to make sense. Academics has to make sense. And then your life outside of soccer has to make sense. 2 of those 3 things have to make sense, because if they don't, and only one of them does, the likelihood that you stay there isn't going to happen. If soccer ends up, if heaven forbid you end up getting a major injury and soccer doesn't work out, well, you're still there for your academics and you still enjoy the life outside of soccer. If academics isn't what you have gone to college for, which I don't think I did either, but I enjoyed the life outside of soccer, but most importantly, I enjoyed soccer. So those 2 things for me made sense. And then flip side, if you don't necessarily like the life outside of soccer, but you can survive there for 4 years because you're with the academics and you enjoy it, and then you're enjoying soccer, then you're willing to deal with the one thing that doesn't make sense. So I always navigate and always kind of advise them, doesn't make sense. Always tell them go on a visit because you have to experience it, and then kind of narrow down, like, you don't need to know what you're going to end up doing, but you have to have an idea of what you want to do academically. Try not to go into it blind. Because if you go into it blind and you realize that life outside of soccer doesn't make sense, but academics and soccer might make sense, and then you get to school and you realize, well, academics doesn't make sense, then you're likely end up, unfortunately, getting into the portal. So over my time here, just kind of help navigate those kids through that. And I mean, a lot of it is, we are blessed to be in an environment where a lot of this college attention comes to these kids rather than these kids having to go find it based off the environment that we're in. So more so being a guide to help navigate some of the conversations that they're having with these coaches. Because at the end of the day, it's not my choice. They have to have a personal relationship with these coaches. So helping navigate through some of the noise, because coaches will be more upfront with an adult or the coach rather than they will be with the player itself. So just hearing what they're saying to the families, and then also the back conversations that I have with those coaches as well, just to make sure that the communication is the same and they're all on the same page, and then help steer them into the right direction. So
Yeah.
I've kind of pushed that on to David Winter, who is our goalkeeper coach, but has really strong connections throughout the country in the college world. That still kind of helps take that approach and take a wider reach to the kids that are going the college route.
It's interesting if you think about the kids that you're working with. I mean, they're some of the top kids in the country. It actually, it's harder in some respects for them to find the right home, because there's heavy money involved. I mean, you got the bigger schools to choose from. These kids want to go pro. And so, you mentioned those three things, the school, the soccer, and the social aspect. For those kids, it's not 33 and a half, 33 and third, 33 and third. It's probably like 80% soccer, 10 and 10 for the other two. And let's be real, if you're going to one of these big schools, the social life's going to be a blast. They all have pretty good academics, so it's not like you're making a bad choice. But man, if you're not playing, that's a dagger. If you're the second guy, that's a dagger. And if you're putting that big of an emphasis on that third, if your third's actually 80%, man, and it's taken away from you. You mentioned injury, but most of these kids are in the portal. It's not because of an injury; it's because they ain't playing. They're healthy. They're just the backup. They're just the third guy, or they also recruited this kid from another big club or from overseas, and they're just, I can't beat this kid out. And so, you're dealing with a whole different animal. I mean, a lot of the kids that I've talked to in the recruiting process, I kind of, it's funny, when COVID happened, I said, you kind of got a blessing here. We're not talking about full ride type kids, just talking about the other 90% of kids that aren't going to get any money. It's like, well, you've had soccer taken away from you. You now know what it's like to not have soccer. So make a decision without it, and then add the soccer on top of it. And I talk to kids all the time that hurt themselves. I use that same phrasing. Oh, you lost soccer because you blew out your knee. This is actually, can you look at it as a blessing? I'm now going to make a decision where soccer is third out of those three things that you mentioned. Or maybe I even lower soccer to like 10%, 15% of my decision. I'm now going to choose based off of exactly what I want to study and the exact social environment. And then if I can play soccer, great. So you're dealing with kids that are like, no, coach, I want to go pro from here. I have to make a soccer specific decision. And, you're talking about an academic financial decision. That soccer's supposed to be down the list a little bit. And for these kids, it's not. I mean, it's a whole different animal that you're dealing with than most of the kids that we were dealing with together here in Williamsburg. I mean, are you running into a lot of kids coming to you like, whew, I thought this was a spot and now it's not? I mean, what are those kids telling you that are unhappy?
Yeah, I mean, historically, no, but more so recently, especially in this year. And to go back to what you just said about the kind of the tiering, the 80 to the 10. Yeah, I think some of these kids now, like, there's money involved, and these kids are being heavily recruited. So obviously, there's some academic money involved. There's some scholarship money involved, and kind of reading behind the scenes in terms of like the money that you get is also tied with your feeling of worth to the college. Well, I've got more soccer money, so the college really likes me, so I'm going to play a ton. But at the end of the day, it's about you going in and performing. And if you're not going to perform, doesn't matter how much money they're giving you. They're going to go with a guy that is outputting and contributing to the success of the group. Because at the end of the day, a college coach's career is on wins and losses, and most, especially these bigger programs, unfortunately.
Right.
So that's a reality that some of these kids need to go through. And granted, like, just because you might not be playing your freshman year doesn't mean you're necessarily not going to play your other years, whether you're on a ton of money or whether you're on zero money. You have to go through that process of failure, which the majority of these kids don't end up going through until later on in life, sometimes in college, to understand exactly what is what's the priority to you. And I think some of these kids are probably going through that more so now than they ever really have been, especially in their youth careers. And I don't mean to say that it's a cop out and jump to a place where I'm more wanted, because some of the kids that I've had conversations with over the last few years have actually played a lot at a certain school, but they've just realized that it wasn't the right fit. So when we come back to soccer's 80% and then academics and social is 20, well, at a big school, at these big programs, yeah, your social life, is going to be great, but there's a different social life in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, than there is in New York City or Chicago. So you as a person need to know what's the environment that you want to be around. Also, academically, there's a difference between your graduating class being 1,000 kids versus your graduating class being 20,000 kids, or your freshman seminar, the highest number of kids that you got in your class is 100 versus your freshman seminar, you're in a lecture hall and you've got 700 kids in your classroom. So these are the types of academic and social aspects and decisions that these kids need to make, because you got kids that go to big schools, but they go to a big school that's in a remote town, but they've come from a big city and they realize this isn't the life for me. Like I can't go, as soon as I go 10 minutes outside of campus, it's cows and trees and mountains and there's nobody there. And the next big city's 3 hours away. So yes, like the majority of your decision is based on soccer, but then it's really important to get down to the finer decisions of what academic life actually looks like. Like I remember at Wake, and the reason why I chose Wake, because at the time Wake's undergrad was 4,000 kids, and had the opportunity to go to a larger schools where graduating classes, the entire graduating class were 4,000 kids,
Right.
and freshman lectures were 700 kids, and I was just a number rather than having a relationship with my teacher. And I knew about me academically, like I wasn't the most stellar scholar, but I knew if I went to a school where I was just a number and there was no accountability for me being in class, I would have not survived. I knew that I needed to be in a class where a teacher saw me every day and knew whether or not I was in class or not in class. And if I wasn't in class, they told my coach, and my coach held me accountable. So I think these are some of the finer details and decisions that kids need to make or to evaluate when they're making what is hopefully a decision for the next 4 years of their life.
Well, what you're talking about here is reality. It's simple.
Yep.
It's just reality. These are the things that you're spending the next 4 years on. And for the majority of kids, you're spending money on. And so, like the stuff that you're talking about, this reality, dealing with your kids, the kids that you're at with Columbus, I mean, it's a whole different world than the majority of the kids, because most of them have quick timelines. Like, hey, these three top schools, these schools that you just watched in the NCAA tournament are all offering one of your kids. And they're not going to wait around until March for you to like sift through and figure it out. Like, no, they want to know soon. And I get it. Like they're picking from the best 15 kids or whatever. Like I need to know, or else I'm going to go to the other kid. And so most of these kids, unfortunately, are making a decision quickly, snap judgment. Well, I've got 3 full rides to choose from, or a full ride and a couple of really good scholarship offers to choose from. And I got to decide now. And it's tough. I feel bad for those kids in a lot of cases, because some of them jump to a decision thinking it's the right one. And, they didn't get to spend enough time to make that call. And for the majority of kids, they do. Majority of kids like, oh, well, nobody's recruiting me. I need to make a decision based off of these schools. And I kind of like, it's a different flip to think about it, but those kids have a little bit of an advantage because they're making a decision for all the right reasons. And then hopefully soccer works once they get to be seen, because it's now January and they've slipped through the cracks or whatever it is. So yeah, it's an interesting one. You're dealing with a lot of kids that have, you're dealing with kids that have to make these decisions so quickly. I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I could. You're going to run into more kids unhappy, with that. And it's unfortunate because they're really good players, man.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that there's anything secret about the process by which we go through. And like I said earlier, in my time here, I haven't had to deal with a lot of kids that have had to transfer. They've stuck with their schools and it's worked out. But I also we talked about it earlier, like you've got some kids that commit super early, and then you've got some kids that see these kids commit super early, and they're freaking out. Well, I've missed my window, and I've missed a school. I'm going to have to settle on the school. And the reality of it is, everybody's timeline is truly different.
Mhm.
We've got. I remember a few years back, we've had a really talented, I won't say the age group, but we had one really talented age group in which a lot of the kids committed to a school relatively early. And one of the top talents, a couple of the top talents, thought that they were hopefully go pro pathway, and they kind of put off the college recruiting and never really developed those relationships that were needed to make the right decision. And come their senior year, they hadn't found a school. They're like, guys, it's okay. Like, we'll find you a school. And they were like, oh, well, all my top choices and all my D1 or choices are going to be gone. Like, the reality is, even in their senior year, there were still a lot of top D1 schools that were actually looking for kids in their age group. And that happens every year. So sometimes kids just pump the brakes. Like, there's always going to be an opportunity. And if your favorite school passes you by, it might pass you by. It doesn't mean that another opportunity doesn't open up. Something will open up. And for instance, in some of these kids, especially that waited until, let's say waited, it just happened to be in their senior year, they made a decision. You had kids that made a decision and have gone to top D1 schools and are playing at top D1 schools a month before preseason started. So they got kids in their own age group that committed 2-3 years prior to that, while he commits a month before preseason starts, and he's at one of the top schools in the country, and he's playing. So I think one thing for hopefully kids that hopefully listen to this podcast is, yes, like you're going to have friends that commit early, but your pathway, your timeline is going to be different, and you're not going to miss an opportunity if you're doing the right things in terms of continuing to have conversations with schools, developing relationships, because there also might be an opportunity where you commit to a school early, you realize unfortunately some things might not work out, financial aid falls through, other things happen where you then have to go back and hopefully talk to some of these coaches that you've had other relationships with, and that timeline may be different, and then you might end up going to a different school. So there's always this internal pressure of making the right choice. Like, everyone will make the right choice when the time comes.
Yeah, I mean, look at your club team. I mean, how many of those guys went to go play college soccer? I mean, almost all of them, right? If
Yep.
not all of them.
Yep.
Hey, I guess played for that team once. I was an emergency ad. We'll put it that way. Emergency ad. But
it was.
yeah. So take all those guys. You're talking about timelines. How many of those guys? I mean, look at the different personalities, the different wants, the different desires, the different majors they wanted to study, and you guys were all from the same, part of the country, and you guys all were on the same team, bunch of goobers, bunch of fun guys, and how many different desires and wants did they all have? And so to think that you guys can have the same timeline is just ridiculous. And you had some superstar kids, some rock star students, some other kids that were, like, hey, I'm probably going to end up Division I, but I'm going to have to take my time because, Kelvin and Stokes and some of these other guys are going to get these offers first. And it's like, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Take your time there and make sure you're making the right decision here. And I couldn't agree with you more, man. It's an ugly process. And the reality, this is the biggest thing that we probably talk about on the podcast, is the reality. Find your reality. Get people that you can trust to give you, realistic expectations and realistic answers. And I'm glad you're doing what you're doing with those kids, because it's like I said, I worry about those guys, because it's like, hey, I got 1 week to make a decision. That's a tough one, and I get why they have to. So interesting.
Yeah, we've, at least in my experience with a lot of the kids, the coaches and the programs that we've worked with have been really good to work with, and I think rarely have we had a timeline where a kid has to make a snap decision.
That's good.
They've actually given some time to kind of evaluate and make sure it was the right fit. So, and I know our environment's a little bit different, but there are programs out there, there are coaches out there that do it for the right reasons, and not necessarily wanting to over recruit, and giving kids the time that they need to make the right decision. Because at the end of the day, it's an investment that the club and the school is making as well, that they're hopefully making for 4 years,
Yeah.
and they want to make sure it's the right fit.
Well, yeah, and if they truly love a kid, then why wouldn't they give them a little more time? I'm sure a lot of those guys that decided to, hey, I'll give you a few extra weeks or an extra month or whatever. A lot of it came with, but where are we on your list? If you got me fourth or fifth, then all right, take all the time you want. I'm going to recruit, assuming you're not coming. I've done that with kids myself, where hey, what's your timeline? Oh, you want to wait till this event? Cool, that's in 3 months. I'm going to assume you're not coming. So I'm going to keep recruiting. Now, there's obviously no money involved with me, and our rosters are bigger at the Division III level, and it's just different. I get that, but it's the same ideology by these coaches. I mean, if they truly love this Columbus Crew kid, they're going to pry a little bit, make sure they're 1 or 2 on the list, and then they're going to say, hey, look, take your time. We love you. We want you to be here, but don't wait till March. Don't wait till April. I can't be left empty-handed here. To kind of give the coaches some defense here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was thinking about recruiting and how different it is nowadays, man. It's compared to when you and I were being recruited, and even just a few years ago, it is night and day different. COVID, transfer portal, all this stuff has completely flipped it upside down. And I mean, of course, there's also way more talent than there used to be.
Yeah,
I mean, way more talent and more good club teams out there, more good coaching at the youth level than when we were growing up. I mean, no offense to my dad, but I mean, I still have the Soccer for Dummies book. I read it from time to time just to get a little refresher. And so, that's one of the things. There's not, 1,000 more schools. It's the same amount of schools for the most part. It's there's just way more kids. I mean, the level's way better than it was when we were growing up.
Yeah, better, way more kids, and talent is more spread out. Like I can't imagine to be a kid to be recruited in this environment compared to when we were growing up. And I also can't imagine being a coach now and trying to find the talent and the allocation of resources. Which events do you go to? Which kids do you go see? Because at least back in the day, the collection of talent was relatively in the same spot. Now it's all over, for good or bad. But yeah, the landscape of the world by which we all have to navigate now compared to when we were younger is much different.
Oh yeah. Well, the age group changed. Now there's 2 age groups to find seniors, and it's you're watching 3 just to watch juniors and seniors. And there's more events than ever before, and I agree with you. There's a ton of talent out there, and it's definitely difficult. I mean, I just at the big UCNL event, and I could have gone down there with absolutely no commitments, no understanding of the landscape at all. I'm like, I just took a job. Let's go recruit for the first time. And the amount of talent that was there uncommitted was unbelievable. I was thinking about it. We had a kid on campus the other day, and I have found that this year's class of seniors have actually been hit the hardest from COVID in terms of recruiting. And it sounds like, how is that possible? And really, my only proof is when I go to these big events, nobody's committed yet. And there's so many good kids that normally I'm like, this kid might have gotten a few bucks to go Division I, and he doesn't have any offers yet. Like, I don't understand. There's so many kids that fit that criteria. And, you look at a lot of the schools now, more schools are living in the portal, more schools are recruiting overseas. And this is still a year when kids are still having their 5th year of eligibility. And so a lot of Division I's, a lot of Division I's are like, wait a minute, I still got this kid who's already been here for 4 years. I get him for a 5th. Like, I don't need to go get a freshman. And so, the Division I's are recruiting a little bit less, at least domestically, because of that. And I mean, I get it. The trickle down has, been fruitful for us. There's kids I never would have thought I would have gotten. So it's nice that way. But, then you go past that and there's no home for these kids.
It's interesting. If you look at the timeline, these seniors were freshmen when all this hit. So their entire high school career, they've been having to deal with kids that have an extra year for COVID.
Yep.
So there's might not be the need to actually recruit when they can keep a kid in house.
Sure.
Especially you can keep a kid in house, and then you can invest in maybe a kid that's overseas because you've already got a kid that's there. It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years if it kind of snaps back once these COVID years are gone and positions and spots continue to open up. I wonder what the landscape kind of looks like.
Yeah, it'll definitely be different because it seems like every 5 years it's flipped on its head somehow. I mean, people are talking about separating out the big schools and creating their own league with that. I mean, it's who knows what decisions are going to be made. We're all kind of like twiddling our thumbs, wondering. And then I know that Division 1 for a long time was looking to make it a year-round
Yep.
process, which I'm sure the pro academies would love that. So they're not taking these huge breaks. I mean, this is one of the things I tell kids all the time. It's like you're going to go to college, and if you're talking to me, a Division 3 school, where we're on the lowest end on how many times you're going to have a coach at your practices, I mean, you'll check in mid-August. Let's say you have a pretty good year and you get to mid-November. That's only 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't see you again until the spring, and I get 24 days with you. So 3 months
Wild.
plus 24 days. I mean, that's less than 4 months. Less than 4 months of soccer. What do you do in the other 8? Like that's, I mean, and so for you, for example, you're trying to get these kids to turn pro. It's like, all
Mm-hmm.
right, can you imagine these guys overseas taking 8 months off? I mean, it's just not going to happen. So,
No.
I get it's an interesting world, I mean, yeah, I can't wait to be back on this podcast in 5 years. Like, hey, remember we talked about that? Way different now.
Kelvin, how do you guys get players into your academy?
How much time you got? It's at the heart of it, it's about programming, right? Like, what are the things that you can do to cast a big a net as you can? And that programming varies depending on the age group. So the younger age groups, if we're casting a net, it's probably more local. Then as you get to the older age groups, you're going national. So uh, part of the club mission is just to own our backyard, own the region. So for us, the region is so within 3 hours from Columbus, you can get to Pittsburgh, you can get to Cleveland, you can get to Toledo, you can get to Detroit, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Louisville, and within that area, you can get. There's roughly, I think it was about 14 million people. So if you put that on terms of geographic landscape compared to all other MLS academies, we're probably like top 5. So why not then have the mission of finding all the top kids within that area? So and then with that being the heart of the mission, you kind of put your program around that. So we have younger U11, U12 programming that meets once a week. We have 13s, 14 programming that kind of expands from there. Then we go full-time teams at 15, 17s, and 19s. And then the allocation of resources from there. You can go from weekly trainings, camps, clinics, combines, and then the man scouting of what our scouting network looks like and who the clubs such as Legacy and the connections that we have there and the communication that we have with clubs and bringing kids in. So, I mean, I could spend another 2-hour podcast and diving deep into what that looks like. But at the end of the day, it's about how you program and putting people in the right place, the right people in the right place to kind of help you grow and cast a wider net as you can.
Can a youth player like actively advocate for themselves to, hey, I want to go play for an MLS pro team academy? I mean, they just reach out to you, or I mean, how does that work? You want me to post your email address? I mean,
They find it anyway. I get LinkedIn, I get Facebook, Instagram. I mean, there's emails. So yeah,
obviously
I mean,
not
all
effective.
Yeah, I mean, you can't knock the hustle, right? It's because some of these times depending on the mood that I'm in, I'll click on an email like, oh, this kid's interesting. I'll shoot him over to the scouting department. But just in general, a random kid, we've got an intake submissions where a kid can put in their information. If they've got a highlight reel, they can put in the link to the highlight reel. And in our scouting department, we have people that go in and look at that weekly, daily, and just kind of filter through those players. And then based off of those kind of clips, they'll recommend whether or not we want to actually go get eyes on them. So they may go to an event to reach out, go to an event, find where the games are, or depending on where they're at, maybe even bring a kid in. So there's various different levels of filtering through that process. Bring them in for a combine and things like that. So I would imagine most professional clubs have that intake, the ability to, like I said, is to cast a wider net as you can. And sometimes you can't get to everybody, and sometimes kids just have to come to you. So there is a way for kids to go onto our recruiting website, our academy website, and go on to recruitment, and they can fill out that link to kind of submit a CV for themselves, and you kind of see what happens. But I get daily at all age groups, kids shooting me emails and their CVs and their highlight tapes. So you never know. One day the right person might open it up, and you might end up in a professional club.
I mean, I'm sure you have eyes everywhere too. It's like you mentioned, you have relationships already with clubs, but I mean, I know there's a lot of guys they'll kind of like push this out to college coaches and other guys. They're like, hey, while you're at this event, go check out some of these U13 games, and just if you see a kid, man, let us know, and that way you can broaden your reach a little bit. I'm sure that's the process. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
So what's next, man? What do you got coming down the pipe, man? Anything exciting?
Well, it's been a heck of a year. I don't know if it gets more exciting than this last year, to be honest with you. It's been wild. We actually start back. The academy starts training again next week, and then the following week, our second team, Crew 2, will start kind of their preseason players coming in for voluntary training, and the week after that, we kind of do our physicals and get back into it. So within the next 2-3 weeks, we'll be up and running. First team will be back. Academy's back in training. Second team is back. So we're just kind of right back to where we were and continue to go. So obviously with my role with the 19s and then working with the second team, and my role is also helping kind of guide the academy coaches. I'll be hitting the ground scooting next week as soon as we get back. So,
well, let me ask you this, man: are you demoing during training?
I haven't demoed in years, man.
Thank you. Like, I wear tennis shoes out there, and like, I'm around college athletes. You're around some of the best academy kids in the country. It's like, hey, here's the drill. I need you to show me this. Like,
Yes.
They're doing it all the time. Why? So I see these coaches out there wearing cleats, and so I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're going to get hurt. Knock it off.
So part of the reason why I haven't demoed in years is because of the ankle.
Yes.
But the reason why it's like I demo, like I'll go and do a passing pattern. I'll demonstrate like body shape and those things. But I'm not jumping into a rondo. I'm not jumping into a 44x3. Like I'll kind of walk through, and then if it needs to be a high level demo, I'll get a kid that actually do it because I can't move anymore.
Right.
But I've come to terms of not playing anymore. I was at a coaching course 2019, and it was day 2, and the coaches had to be the players. It was in the morning, and in the afternoon the players actually come out. So this was so when I first moved 2017, I just had my surgery. 6 months prior to that, I moved, so I never really got into like proper rehab. So for the year and a half prior to that, I was just lame and like I could barely even move. So 6 months prior to this coaching course, I had started PT again, and I was starting to feel really good, and I had missed playing so much that like I was starting to play.
This is bad recipe, man. This is a bad recipe.
So this was our academy preseason starts in August, so I'm starting to play a little bit more and get involved and starting to kick the ball around. And it's like I've got the itch again. So coaching course comes. They say, hey, they send out an email, say, hey, let you know part of this course you have to play. I send them a note back and said, hey, I just had ankle surgery. Like, I'm probably not going to be able to play that much. I can gladly hop in goal. Like, just let you know, I'm not going to be able to play. So I wasn't expecting to play. Mm-hmm. We go out day 1, like run around having a warm up. It's like, I feel pretty good. Like maybe I get into the rondo tomorrow. So I go into the rondo, playing in the rondo. I'm buzzing, feeling great. I was like, I'm going to the small-sided game. This looks fun. Getting to the small-sided game about 15 minutes in. I'm playing center back. Ball gets crossed in, gets played to the other side of the box. We end up winning the ball. Ball gets played back to our goalkeeper. I'm opening up to the goalkeeper's left. He plays me a ball that ends up like just a yard or so in front of me. I step back with my good ankle, pop my Achilles, done. I was like, nah, I'm not playing anymore. I'm good.
Gosh, man.
Yeah. So.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I'm good. Good.
I was talking to Jamie about it here because Jamie like really picked up as a player after college. I mean, like he was playing professionally here with the Lions Bridge crew, and I kept on giving him a hard time. Like, man, you got to stop. You got to stop. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And he fought it off for a long time. I have a similar story. I was playing my last year, I think, with the Legacy. I was coaching a girls team, and I was in the same boat, man. I hopped in goal. The numbers were not even, so I was the goalie. My team's losing 6-0, so you can see the type of effort that I was giving. But then these girls started like passing me the ball. And so I'm like, all right, I'll knock it around. And there's no pressure on me or anything. So all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm going to knock a couple. Mm-hmm. That confidence, I'm like, oh no. And so all right, go get a quick drink of water. And I see the crossbar. I'm like, I'm getting that crossbar. And in my backswing, I hear pop, feel it, everything, blood rushes through the whole body. Muscle memory, I still swing through, fall on the ground. I'm screaming bloody murder. I end up ripping the groin off my bone. Oh. And I'm like, I'm never playing soccer. And that was it. I will never, ever, like, I go kick around with my kid. I'm like, we're indoors. And I'm using the bottom of my feet. I'm rolling to the ball. Yep. I'm never doing it again, ever. Sorry.
It's wild. So this coaching course was for like MLS Academy coaches. So all the coaches there were in MLS Academies. A lot of them were kind of former players or young.
Probably a high level.
Yeah. And still playing. So we started the course in 2019. It was supposed to be a year-long course. COVID hit the next year. So the course ended up being a 3-year course just because things got pushed back because of COVID. And in that 3 years, 4 of us tore our Achilles.
Oh, it's funny how these kids are though, man, because you're right. I'll like, if I'm not seeing what I need to see, I'll like, this is maybe twice a year tops. I'm like, this is what I want to see. And I'll like show like I'm talking 5-yard movement where I round my body properly. Yeah. And it's funny. The reaction is, oh, okay. You know, these guys like, yeah, jerks. I did play a little growing up, you know, like,
The most I'll do now is just jump into a friendly rondo at the beginning of the game and try to get beginning of practice and try to get a meg in, and that's when the players can see Kelvin's had a little bit left in him. Yeah. No, that's about it, guys. I'm not striking any long balls. I'm not kicking anything. I'm not running. I'm not sprinting.
Well, and the worst part now is because we don't play it all anymore. One of the things I worry about, not just getting hurt, that's the number one concern, but if I were to really try to demo something, I can't imagine it's going to look very good. And I don't need these kids going like, oh, why would I listen to this guy anymore, man? You know, like, I'm not trying to prove myself anymore. Those days are over.
I feel as if I wanted to demo at top speed right now, it's a running to go kick a ball or jogging back and jumping up to hit a ball. If I wanted to do it at top speed, at one point in that athletic movement, all of my muscles and bones and joints would just separate, just explode.
No chance, man. No chance. Like, can you imagine if Bobby were to call and say, hey, we're putting the staff versus players game together again? Like, no. I will coach the staff. I don't know what you want out of here, man. Those days are over.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. Fine.
Yeah.
All right, glory days, guys. Kelvin, tell us about your experience at the World Cup.
I don't know how to put it into words. Like, I've had conversations with people post the World Cup and coming back, and like, they're not actually long conversations because I don't know how to explain it. It's unique, and you kind of have to be there. And I think going into this, it was kind of a year-long process where I got involved with U.S. soccer. So I remember the first conversation that I had with my boss about going into one of the camps. It was a 20s camp 2 falls ago. Pulled me aside and said, hey, U.S. soccer, Brian McBride reached out, asked if you would be interested in going to camp with the 20s. I was like, serious? Like, yeah. Like, you want to do it? It's like, yeah, absolutely, of course. Like, you never really think as a coach that is a kind of a pathway, an opportunity, and it's one that you kind of don't say no to. And then I've been blessed. The club's been super supportive of all of my involvement with anything that I've done with the national team, and I remember in that part of that conversation is, hey, you never know what will happen. You get yourself to a World Cup. Like, yeah, I mean, why not? That sounds great. And within that next year, the 20s had a World Cup and the 17s had a World Cup. So you never know. Like, you go to this camp, and I wasn't expecting anything post this event with the 20s. I really enjoyed my time. I learned a ton from the staff, and I got along quite well with the staff. And I guess the old adage, like, it's who you know that kind of gets you in the door, which I don't know how I got, but I'm sure it's because of connections that I've had somewhere. It's kind of what you know that keeps you there. And my experience and my time with the 20 staff led to an opportunity with the 17 staff about a few months later. The 17s coach is typically the assistant for the 20s, and the reason why the 20s called me in is because the 17s had an event at the same time. So once that was done, the 17s coach, assistant coach, took a new job at a MLS Next Pro club, and the 17s had an opening. So the relationship between the 20s and 17s coach said, "Hey, is there anybody that you recommend to at least come in for this camp?" And the 20s coach recommended me to go into this camp, and I went to a camp in January last year. And again, didn't expect anything of it, and it all worked out well and got along well with the staff. But it was also the last camp before U17 World Cup qualifiers. So in the back of my mind, I kind of thought, if I do well, things go well. Like, I would imagine they want to keep the staff together, and things went well, and had the opportunity to go to qualifiers. We qualified. And in that moment, you kind of realize, like, I'm going to be in a World Cup. And you think of a World Cup, like, for me, there's kind of two World Cups that you think about in terms of, like, prestige of a World Cup. Obviously, the World Cup, the Senior World Cup, and then the 17s World Cup. Obviously, the 20s have a World Cup, but I don't think in terms of the coaching world, I think there's more notoriety around the 17s World Cup than the 20s. And I think more so for us, Cheese, as well, because when we were, our U17 year was that Landon Donovan year, the Gucci year. It's actually the group that made it the farthest. They made it to semifinal. For me personally, when I was younger, I was a part of that group and played with a lot of those guys, and kind of missed out on my opportunity to be that as a player. And then when the opportunity came up to be a part of it as a coach, it was really, really special. So I think that's why I'd say it's difficult to kind of put in words my experience of it, because it's so kind of personal to my kind of development as a coach, my pathway as a coach and a player, and then to kind of come full circle to that. I'm not going to say how many years, but a lot of years later, was kind of unique. And then just the World Cup itself, it was in Indonesia. It's a part of the world that I can say that I wanted to go to, but I would say I was never wanting to go to, because it's so far and I hate flying. But the World Cup, and you're not going to say you're not going to go to the World Cup because you hate flying. You don't want to be in a 14-hour, 15-hour flight. So to be that part of the world was really, really special. So there was two kind of parts to the experience. Like, there was a 10-day pre-camp in Bali, which I missed because I had responsibilities at the club that I had to take care of, which was fine. It was great. So I missed all of the pre-camp, which was all the preparation to get ready for the event itself. So by the time I got to the World Cup, we were in the capital of Jakarta, and it was work. So kind of my role was kind of the second assistant, kind of helped with opposition scouting, obviously in-day training and game kind of management. But by the time I got there, we were in a hotel I doubt you guys have ever been to Jakarta, but it's massive, 35 million people. I mean, it's just a sprawling city. So by the time we got there, there's not a ton to do, because it's practice, maybe 2 days of training, practice, 2 days of training, and then we're right into the event, right in the game. So as soon as the game is over, you're preparing for the next game. So there wasn't much kind of a cultural experience for me, but what I've learned or kind of taken away, just whether it's the World Cup or just my time at the national team period, is you're working in a completely different capacity, in a completely different environment. So here at my club, I've always been a head coach and kind of transitioned into kind of an assistant coach now with the second team. But there I'm truly an assistant, and I'm hyper focused on these tasks. And it was really neat to be a part of a staff where everybody is trusted to be within their own lane. execute within your own lane, which is also then for the greater good for the players and the success of the group. So kind of learning that skill set as an assistant coach is really, really beneficial. And it's been beneficial for me over the last year or so being with the national team, and things that I've taken away from the national team that I've actually been hopefully to bring to the club and kind of implement within the club to kind of make our coaches and our player pool better. So
that's awesome.
I saw you on TV, and I don't know if you were like doing something in warm ups or whatever, but you were sweating like crazy.
It was hot. It was so hot.
Yeah. So you're like, what's the next step there? Like, will you continue to fill roles there, or are you just kind of at their mercy, so to speak?
Yeah, I don't know. Like my experience for the last year with the 17s was great. And Gonzalo and Alex and all the other staff have been super supportive, and they've been great to work with. And whether I work with them again or not, with the national team, there are always people that we'll always be in touch with, and hopefully our paths continue to cross. Soccer world is small, that we might cross again at some point. I would love to be back with the national team or be a part of anything. But you never know. I mean, just like a player, for me, you get called in for a camp doesn't mean you're going to get called back into a camp. So when you are in a camp as a player, it's about how you perform in camp that gets you the opportunity to come back. So I think I've done a good job. Like I said, I've enjoyed the experience. I enjoyed working with the staff, and hopefully opportunities come up at some point. And I've been fortunate enough to meet some great people in U.S. soccer. And I don't know, like there's no contract. There's you're going to do this, you're going to do that. If I get a call, I get a call. If I don't, I don't. And I will always continue to use the things that I learned in the environment and continue to be in touch with the people that were there in the environment. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't think there's another camp from anything on the boys' side for the next few months. So I don't know. We'll see.
Cool. Man.
Yeah, definitely. It was fun to hear that you were doing that and see you on TV halfway around the world.
You see the mustache?
Yeah. Sexy as usual.
So it was obviously November, No Shave November. So it was about a month before the World Cup. They actually had a pre-camp in Brazil, and all of the support staff, the analysts and ATCs and docs had kind of bonded and said, "Yeah, when we go to the World Cup, we're going to do mustaches." So I got there. I was like, "All right, well, I'll do it for one game." So I did it for, I think it was the second game, and of course we won that game. So you're like, "Oh, I got to keep it."
Keep rolling.
Keep rolling. So, but I shaved it, and it was about 12-hour difference. So I can only really talk to the family when they woke up before they went to school, and then kind of right before I went to bed. So I FaceTimed my wife, and she hadn't seen it. So I FaceTimed her, and the connection was a little bit bad, so she could hear me, but she couldn't see me. And then when the camera came on, she said she almost turned it off because she thought she was talking to the wrong person. And then she saw it and she started dying laughing. She's like, "What are you doing? That's a mustache."
But you're not going back to it, safe to say.
Safe to say, yeah, I'm not going back to it.
Yeah. Those of us
gotta get rid of these grays.
Man, looks good.
Yeah,
looks good.
Seasoned.
Yeah, yes, a little salt and pepper.
Yeah. Cool. You guys have anything else?
Good, man. It's good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, you guys as well. Enjoyed it. I'm happy to do it again.
Absolutely. Yeah. We will, for sure.
I'll definitely give you a call when we iron out our details. It's in September. It'll be the last weekend in September. So I don't know what that normally looks like for you guys, but we'll be out there during that time.
Actually, hold on. Let me see. I got to schedule.
I'm hitting stop
on some stuff.